Okay, good morning. I am coming to you on March 14th on the situation in Ukraine. Well, um, I'd like to turn to the battlefield first, then I'd like to talk about diplomatic events which seem promising, and finally, with a little predictive few predictions. Well, the battlefield is static, which bodes again very well for the Ukrainians. And in fact, when you see the maps with the red areas marking Russian-controlled territory, it's not really controlled territory. Jane makes that perfectly clear, and other intelligence reports make that very, very clear. These are Russian advances. They don't. It doesn't necessarily mean they control the territory or they consolidate any kind of control over these territories. So that the Ukrainians have split the lines, have turned flanks, and have inflicted just incredible damage on Russian forces. I think I mentioned that yesterday. As of yesterday, there were about 300 tanks destroyed, about 500 armored vehicles, 49 planes, over 80 helicopters. The Ukrainians claim that they've killed 10 to 11,000 Russians, and although that has not been completely confirmed, it is quite possible. It's quite plausible. And if that's the case, then you have 3 times the number of wounded, and that would be just an extraordinary number for a war that has 19 days. Again, I think that's driving the attacks on civilians that are being carried out indiscriminately by Russian forces because they just cannot gain control of the battlefield. And they're losing on the conventional war. Therefore, they're turning to tactics of terror, which have never really worked, unless you get you can break the morale of peoples. But if you think back in World War II, Stalingrad was pummeled by the Germans into dust, and after that, the Russians still emerged to defeat the German forces. Indiscriminate bombing of civilian populations tends to stiffen the resolve of people unless you can carry it out to such an extent where you can exterminate a population. I don't think that will be the case here. So I believe that if the Russians remain on the battlefield, they will take unsustainable casualties in the next few weeks. Therefore, I think that they will turn to the peace negotiations. I think that China is very interested in settling this matter. They're increasingly embarrassed by their association with Putin. They have certain priorities which do not line up very well with Putin's own. They're suffering economic harm already. The Chinese stock exchange had suffered some losses, significant losses. Their Belt and Road project, which is their primary project in Eastern Europe and Asia, has been bombed. The infrastructure has been bombed by the Russians, so that they're interested in ending that. In addition to that, the impending default on the Russian debt, Russian bonds, this Wednesday, I think worries the Chinese because they're holders of bonds, and they want the world financial system to keep on functioning, and the Russian default on the public debt would send tremors through the world financial system and would threaten Chinese economic stability. Therefore, I think the Chinese are very interested in ending the war through negotiations, and in fact, President Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan will be meeting with the director of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Chinese government, a member of the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party, Yang Shi, and that bodes well for some kind of resolution. In addition to that, the Ukrainian chief negotiator, a man by the name of Mykhailo Podolyak, and a spokeswoman for the Kremlin, Maria Zakharova, both have said that there are significant talks between the Ukrainians and the Russians taking place. So there seems to be some hope for a negotiated peace, and I think it will. It's the only way Putin gets out of this with anything. Otherwise, he will be defeated on the battlefield, and he most likely will be overthrown in short order. If he gets a negotiated peace, declares victory, and then goes home, with some concessions, some minor concessions, I don't think full neutrality or finalization is possible in the Ukraine, given the amount of destruction that the Russians have wreaked on that country. I think the hatred for Russia and the Russian government will go deep and will be generational, but they might get some concessions, that is not in no immediate membership in NATO, maybe some delay in membership in the EU for the Ukraine. That may be possible. No demilitarization. I don't see that how the Ukrainians can negotiate that, given the threat of Russian aggression. I think territorially, they will not recognize the breakaway Russian separatist states in the east. They may declare a ceasefire there, and they may recognize to some extent the situation, the status quo in Crimea. Crimea is a different situation altogether. It's primarily Tatar and Russian. Therefore, I don't think that that would be such a leap, such a stretch. Nonetheless, that leaves Irredenta for the Ukrainians, and Irredenta is always dangerous. It's destabilizing. This idea that there's land that has been taken from us, and we are determined and committed to its recovery. That is always dangerous, but I think that the negotiated peace will have to deal with some kind of irredentism will result in some kind of irredentism for the Ukrainians. I think the Chinese that's the interesting factor in the negotiations. President Xi Jinping wants stability for the next year at least. He wants to gain that unprecedented third term. And he understands that the Chinese military is unequipped to threaten any area, and he would like just stability and peace. Again, the Chinese have never prioritized the soldier or the military. And this dates back to Confucianist times, that is 6th century BC. Confucius, as I mentioned before, had a social hierarchy, and the soldier was at the very bottom of that hierarchy. He did not think very highly of the military or of soldiers, and that has remained a cardinal point for Chinese culture and Chinese policy making. In fact, I think back to the Xiongnu during the Han Dynasty, and the Xiongnu being a nomadic people that threatened the northern areas of China. The Han always mainly opted for diplomatic solutions to that problem rather than the military one, and the military was harshly treated. We know that from the annals of the great historian Sima Shan, who wrote about his own involvement in that, where the Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty around 96 BC punished a general for losing a battle against the Xiongnu and forcing him to cede one of his daughters, and an inordinate amount of gold to satisfy the Xiongnu. And then Sima Shan actually pleaded for the disgraced general, whereupon the Emperor Wu decided to punish Sima Shan with the sentence of death. He later relented and only turned Sima Shan into a eunuch for his defense of the military. This is how China usually deals with the military. It certainly does not prioritize the military, and it's much more aware and sensitive to economic loss. And I think that this situation is beginning to cause China some economic instability, and therefore the Chinese will be interested in negotiating a peace. I think a peace will be achieved at some point in the next few weeks, and my opinion is that it will be limited, but everyone will know that it's a Ukrainian victory.